You said today you want to give Travis's family closure. You know they want you dead, so why don't you give them that closure?
What do you mean by that? Why don't I kill myself? Is that what you're asking?
No, why don't you accept the fate of the... If you know that's what they want.
Hell no. No. No.
And you feel no remorse for that?
I would kill him again.
I don't know what else to say. I just don't know. I didn't want to die in jail. A person like this. I don't want to end my life.
There really is few places that are far worse and more miserable than prison. For a court to decide that you need to stay there for the rest of your lifetime, you have to have done something that is truly evil. The women in this video did just that. The following stories tell the tale of 13 evil and twisted female convicts who found out that they would be spending their future behind bars.
Sandra Lane deserves the maximum penalty allowed. Please do not show mercy on her.
The mother of Jonathan Hoffman got her wish. Sandra Lane will spend at least 20 years in prison for killing her grandson.
It was a story that nobody could stop talking about. An elderly grandmother who killed her own grandson after a heated argument about his illegal substance use. He was reportedly around on probation after getting into legal trouble in the past, but was caught again with a substance. It was May 8th of 2012, and law enforcement received a disturbing 911 call from a 17-year-old boy. His voice was fading and he was barely clinging on to life. He told them that his grandma had him and that he knew he was going to die. When detectives arrived at the scene, the first thing they saw was 74-year-old Sandra Lane standing outside her condo. She was weak and frail and didn't look like a killer, but inside of her home they would find a deadly weapon and blood everywhere. They also found Jonathan Hoffman dead on the floor. She was arrested and charged with his murder. In court, Sandra pleaded not guilty. Her defense tried to say that she had only been acting in self-defense and that she never would have killed her grandson if she had any other choice.
I don't know what else to say. I just don't know. I didn't want to die in jail. A person like this. I don't want to end my life.
But the jury wasn't convinced, and she was convicted on March 19th of 2013 of her grandson's murder. She received 20 years behind bars, which for her is nothing short of a life sentence.
Tonight, a major break in a Greene County murder case 7 months after a pregnant woman was found dead along the side of the road.
It was a horrible case from Knoxville, Tennessee. A young, pregnant woman named Jessie Morrison was brutally killed and tossed aside with no dignity. She left behind 2 other very young children. But here's the real shocker. The person who killed her was her unborn child's own grandmother.
Authorities in Greene County have charged Vonda Starr Smith with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the death of 21-year-old Jessie Nicole Morrison and her unborn child. Morrison was found dead on the side of a Greene County road back in August of last year.
Vonda Smith's son, William, was the father of not only Jessie's unborn child who was killed, but another one of her young children. There was supposedly tension between Vonda and Jessie because Vonda felt that she hadn't been allowed enough time to spend with her grandchild. Vonda had allowed Jessie to borrow her vehicle, but when detectives looked inside the vehicle, they found blood all over the passenger seat. There was more than enough evidence to convict this killer grandmother of not just Jessie's murder, but of her unborn child's as well.
Entering the courtroom with a smile on her face, Vonda Smith greeted her attorney and waited for her sentencing in the 2016 murder of Jessie Morrison.
At the sentencing, the judge told Vonda that she had abused this young woman's trust in her.
She trusted being with you as opposed to being with a stranger. And bad things happened. This murder happened after that.
Jessie's loved ones asked that Vonda receive the maximum sentence for this horrible crime.
There's not enough justice on this earth that can bring my daughter back or my grandchild.
The judge granted them their wish and sentenced Vonda to life in prison.
I'm asking you where you were at last week. Why do you want me to tell you that?
At one point, it seemed as if Diana Lovejoy, a wife and mom from California, seemed to have it all. She had a loving husband named Greg Mulvihill and a son that she was crazy about. But things at home weren't as picture perfect as they seemed. Diana had been having an affair with a former Marine named Welton McDavid. She eventually split from Greg and wanted sole custody of their child. But Greg wasn't about to give up his rights. Diana was willing to do whatever was needed to not have to share her son. So she came up with a plan and enlisted Welton to help. They were going to make sure that they would never have to worry about Greg interfering in their lives ever again. Welton lured Greg to a secluded area and then fired his weapon at him. But things didn't go as planned. Greg survived and was able to call 911. From the beginning, Diana and Greg were top suspects. When Welton was brought in to be questioned by detectives, he was super defensive and didn't want to cooperate at all. He wouldn't answer questions about where he was on the night that Greg had nearly been killed.
Can you give me access to your phone to show that you were home by 11 o'clock?
That's fine. Well, hey, so listen. That area,
you guys are trying to accuse me of
No, we're not.
But it didn't matter if Welton wanted to cooperate or not because law enforcement already had everything they needed to charge both he and Diana with conspiracy to commit murder. Diana pleaded not guilty and stood by her innocence until the very end.
It's so painful that some people in this world seem to think that I would have it in me to do this.
But when she found out that she had been convicted and she was going to be spending most of the rest of her life behind bars, Diana's face went white and she slumped to the ground, causing gasps in the courtroom.
To commit murder.
I need to take a break.
Diana was sentenced to 26 years behind bars. Welton was also convicted and received the same sentence.
That is a charge called homicide felony murder. It is life without parole.
Tatiana Fusari and her husband, Seth Welch, were the parents of a beautiful baby girl named Mary Welch. But sadly, these are people who should have never ever been trusted with the life of an innocent little child. They were both negligent parents who didn't even do the bare minimum necessary to take care of little Mary. Mary lived only 10 short months before she passed away from what was later determined to be severe dehydration and malnutrition. This was because her parents had not bothered to feed her. It wasn't like little Mary just passed away quickly in her sleep one day. What happened to her likely went on for days and was very painful. That was clear by just how bad her condition was when she was finally found, weighing no more than 8 pounds.
The baby was so malnourished she had sunken eyes and cheeks and no pulse when paramedics found her at the Welch home outside Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Tatiana and Seth were both charged with Mary's murder. Despite everything they did, they seemed surprised to find out just how much trouble they were in.
His mouth drops in shock. He can't believe what he's hearing. His wife's reaction? She sobs uncontrollably. Tears streak her face.
Seth was convicted of Mary's murder and was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Tatiana stood trial the year after that. She told the court that her husband was abusive to her and that this made it really difficult for her to take care of baby Mary. She also claimed that Seth never let her take her daughter to the hospital, even when it was clear that Mary needed medical care. Tatiana's story wasn't enough to make anyone feel any sympathy for her, not after the horrific details of what she had done were now all out in the open. She was finally convicted and sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole.
Hell no. No. No.
And you feel no remorse for that?
I would kill him again.
It's pretty rare that you hear about a mother killing not only one of her children, but 2 of them. A mother ending the life of the person she gave birth to seems to be against second nature. But for Mitchell Blair, it was something that she doesn't regret or feel any guilt about. It's something that she would do again. Tragically, Mitchell made a horrific discovery that would be hard for any mother to come to terms with. 2 of her older children had been horribly her youngest, a little boy. They had taught the little boy to do disgusting and inappropriate things that he was way too young to know about. Mitchell's older son and daughter, Stephen Blair and Stoney Blair, had both taken part in thoughts of their little sibling. When Michelle found out, she decided that she would take justice into her own hands. She killed Stefan first, and she didn't do it quickly or painlessly. She started by boiling a pot of water. Then she threw it on him when he was least expecting it. She then used a pillow to cut off his air supply until he was dead. When that was finished, she hid his body in her apartment. Months later, Michelle then killed her daughter. It was a slow and painful death, but it was what she felt her daughter deserved. She later hid Stoney's body in the same place that she had put Stefan's. Michelle hadn't chosen a very good hiding spot, considering she wasn't paying rent for the apartment where both bodies were. When she eventually got evicted, both of the bodies were discovered and she was arrested. Michelle admitted to everything.
What did you do to Stoney Blair that makes you guilty of premeditated murder?
She my son. I intentionally killed her.
In prison, Michelle often became angry and aggressive. She especially got mad when the father of her children came to testify against her. She blamed him for some of the things that had happened, saying that he should have played a more active role in his children's lives.
I had to beg you to come see me. For real?
Mother, listen to
No
me.
matter how much you lie or how your lawyers lie.
You done, Mother?
In June of 2015, Michelle was sentenced to 2 counts of first-degree murder. She received life in prison with no chance of parole.
The driver accused of killing 3 Valley teens has pleaded not guilty to charges. Benny Duarte is facing 3 counts of murder and DUI.
In March of 2018, a woman named Bonnie Duarte was driving while intoxicated in California when she slammed into another vehicle. Inside of the vehicle were 4 teenagers who were all in the area for spring break. 3 of the teenagers were killed in the crash and the other was seriously injured. Bonnie was later convicted of 3 counts of second-degree murder. She later admitted to what she had done and expressed remorse, but also asked for mercy.
At this point, I don't even know who's going to raise my children, or if I'm ever going to be able to ever hug them again or comfort them. No one is to blame but me. I take responsibility.
She received 51 years to life behind bars, but to the parents who lost their children, this was little consolation.
It doesn't matter. My daughter can't do anything. My daughter died horrifically.
Shelby Isaac was still a teenager when she was charged for her role in a Memphis, Tennessee triple homicide. The victims included a man, a woman, and their unborn child. Of all the things to argue over, Shelby and one of the victims had gotten into a disagreement about hair weaves. She had arranged to meet up with him by telling him that she wanted to purchase more, luring him to the location where all 3 of the victims would be killed. Shelby stood by her innocence until the very end, but the jury did not rule in her favor. When she found out that she had been convicted, she couldn't help but collapse to the ground in shock.
Of second-degree murder as included in count 1. Signed by the foreperson of the jury. Mr. Aldridge, is that your verdict?
Following the verdict, Shelby was reportedly removed from the courtroom while sobbing and screaming out for her mother. She was sentenced to 30 years behind bars.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder.
Guilty! The woman who shot her boyfriend because he was about to ditch her for a Miss USA contestant sobs as she is convicted of murder.
Ryan Poston, a 28-year-old attorney, had it all. He was successful and had devastatingly good looks, but he ended up meeting a girl whose jealousy and obsession with him would cost him his life. Ryan met Shayna Hubers through a mutual friend when she was just 20 years old. She was full of promise, just like he was, and the top of her class in school. But their relationship was very messy, and they were often on again and off again. Shayna was incredibly possessive and couldn't bear the thought of Ryan being with anyone else but her. In fact, she was willing to do anything to make sure that never happened. In October of 2012, Shayna and Ryan were not together. In fact, the next day he had plans to go on a date with another girl named Audrey Bolte, who was Ohio's 2012 Miss USA. And when Shayna found out about this, she basically lost her mind.
She broke into his email, his Facebook, by her own admission and tried to scare away other women that were interested in him and was totally jealous when she found out he had a date with Miss Ohio the night he was murdered. very well the last straw.
On that evening, a 911 call came in from Shayna. She told the dispatcher that she had killed Ryan inside of his condominium. She claimed that he had become abusive to her and that she had to kill him in order to defend herself.
I grabbed the gun and I shot him.
But it quickly became clear that Shayna killed Ryan on purpose. While she was at the station being interviewed by law enforcement, they left a camera rolling while they left her in the room for a short time. Shayna acted very strangely, dancing around and singing the song Amazing Grace. At one point, she made a comment about how she was such a good actress. Shayna was charged with Ryan's murder, and her trial began 2 years later. Because her bail was set at $5 million, which she couldn't pay for, she had no choice but to stay in jail for all that time. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury had made their decision. They found her guilty. Listen to the reaction in the courtroom when Shayna finally learned what her fate was going to be.
And there were audible gasps in court as the jury decided Shayna Huber's sentence today.
We, the jury, fixed the defendant, Shayna Huber's punishment for the offense of murder at life imprisonment.
Following the sentencing, Ryan's mother spoke out on behalf of her son.
Ryan believed in the justice system, always, always, and it has not failed him.
A friend of ours is dead in his bedroom. We hadn't heard from him for a while. We think he's dead. His roommate just went in there and said there's lots of blood. I didn't go in, but I can give you the phone to someone who went in there.
The voice you just heard was a friend of a young man named Travis Alexander. Travis was a pretty remarkable person and everybody knew it. Starting at a young age, Travis had gone through a lot of suffering. He was born into poverty and neglect, and he rarely had enough to eat. He knew what it was like to go days being hungry. But when he was 11 years old, he and his siblings were sent to go live with their grandparents, and life started getting better. Travis seemed determined to make the most out of the difficult life circumstance he had come from and be successful. And just like that, he did. Travis was a successful businessman and an inspirational speaker. He was also a very dedicated member of his church, the Church of Latter-day Saints. His life was heading in a very positive direction. And then, at a convention one day, he met a woman named Jodi Arias, and the two connected very quickly.
After the banquet, Travis and her hung out until 4 o'clock in the morning, just talking and getting to know each other. And the next morning, he tells me that he's found his wife and this is the girl that he wants to marry.
Travis's friends were a little concerned with how quickly things between him and Jodi began moving. It was clearly really serious between the two. Travis even broke a vow of celibacy that he had taken and was intimate with Jodi. This was a big no-no in Travis's religion. And then there was the PDA, which made Travis's friends pretty uncomfortable.
For example, one night we're all in the hot tub. There's 4 of us, this is a time to chat and hang out. Well, Jodi is like climbing on Travis while we're trying to have this conversation.
But too much PDA was far from the worst of the problems that were coming in this relationship. Jodi was absolutely obsessed with Travis. She had to be with him all of the time. She was also the type to get very angry and possessive if he was spending too much time around the rest of his friends. While she and Travis were happy for a while, it didn't take long before Travis started to see all the red flags about her that his friends had been telling him about her. He decided to end things before she could get even more attached, and so they broke up after 5 months. Before long, Travis started to move on with his life. He began dating a new girl named Lisa, and when Jodi found out about Lisa, she became very angry and tried to do everything she could to sabotage the relationship. She would hack into Travis's Facebook and cancel their dates together. She would slash the tires of his car so he wouldn't be able to drive and go see her. Once she even snuck into his house through his doggy door. It would be clear to anybody at this point that Jodi was totally deranged and somebody to stay away from. But some part of Travis must have still had feelings for her because he had trouble letting her go completely. Sometimes they would still hang out from time to time and hook up. And then came the spring of 2008. None of Travis's friends had heard from him in a while and he wasn't answering their calls. This wasn't like him at all. They began to get worried, and so together they went to the house. At this point, many of them had a gut feeling that something was horribly, horribly wrong. Zachary, one of Travis's friends, volunteered to be the one to go inside and check things out. What he saw when he went inside was like something out of a horror movie.
My heart was pounding, just because I feared for the worst.
I opened the door, and immediately as soon as I opened it, there was a puddle of blood on the carpet. And so as soon as I saw that, I walked past it. I looked down the hallway to his bathroom, and so I could see the blood all over the ground, all over the walls.
The next thing that Zachary saw was Travis's body. He was lying in the shower with no clothes on. He looked like he had been dead for at least a few days. He broke the tragic news to his friends outside, and they called 911.
He said, "Chris, T-Dog's dead." And I remember just saying, almost like howling, you know, like, no, no, oh, no, no. You know, oh my gosh, how did this happen?
It was a shock. I couldn't feel anything.
Investigators found a few different interesting things at the scene of the crime. One thing was a digital camera that had been thrown into the washing machine. When the memory card was taken out, they discovered that it had pictures on it showing Travis in the shower. These pictures were believed to have been taken on the night when he was killed. They also found a bloody handprint. The handprint was traced to Jodi Arias, and pretty soon she became their #1 suspect. They were able to track her phone and saw that she had been in the same location as Travis the night of the murder, and then her phone's connection suddenly disappeared.
I believe that you had come to visit Travis. Yes, I truly believe it. Did you have the opportunity? Yes, you're traveling alone. There's no other witnesses. Your phone just happened to turn off from here to here.
Well, I didn't turn it off physically, but it died.
Jodi told a lot of stories and lies about how her DNA just happened to be at the scene of the crime, but she wasn't very convincing. Throughout her time in custody, in between when she was being questioned by detectives, Jodi behaved super strangely. Sometimes she would start singing or laughing to herself, and at one point she even did a headstand. Maybe she thought if she seemed crazy enough, she wouldn't get into trouble. Eventually, Jodi was charged with Travis's murder. She pleaded not guilty. The trial was a long and painful one for all involved, but eventually the jury did come to a decision.
Do find the defendant as to count 1, first-degree murder, guilty. 5 jurors find premeditated, 0 find felony murder, 7 find both premeditated and felony.
Finally, Jodi had been convicted and justice had been served for Travis and his family. The only thing left was sentencing.
That a natural life sentence is appropriate. It is ordered. The defendant shall be incarcerated in the Department of Corrections for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
Jodi would spend the rest of her life behind bars, but some people think that it would be more fair for her to no longer get to live at all. In a prison interview after her sentencing, one reporter asked Jodi a pretty tough question.
You said today you want to give Travis's family closure. You know they want you dead, so why don't you give them that closure?
What do you mean by that? Why don't I kill myself? Is that what you're asking?
No, why don't you accept the fate of the if you know that's what they want?
This is what she had to say.
And I think that by asking for death, I'm only going to cause more pain to my family.
Concurrent as to the first 2 counts.
The crying you hear is coming from Cook's mother. The sentence much more severe than they expected.
This is the story of an 18-year-old girl named Keandra Cook from Daytona Beach, Florida. In the summer of 2017, she made a series of bad decisions that led to her spending 2 decades of her life in prison. Keandra and her boyfriend tried to carjack and rob a young man. She used a dating app to lure him to the location, and in the process, the victim was seriously injured. He barely survived. In court, she asked for a second chance.
I just want to say to you, I'm asking for forgiveness for a second chance so I can get out and finish school and I can put my mama proud because I want to be her first child to bring home a high school diploma. And I just want to make my mama proud.
Keandra seemed to have some confusion about how serious the offenses were that she was facing. She had taken a plea deal, which she thought meant that she wouldn't be facing any prison time at all. She was completely wrong about that.
Ms. Cook, you're before the court for sentencing. A couple of things going in your favor. One, you didn't hold a firearm during these episodes. The second is that the victim luckily survived. That being said, this was intentional. It was an orchestrated ambush, and you are a main part of that. And for that, I'm going to go ahead and adjudicate you guilty of all 3 charges, sentence you to 20 years in state prison.
Keandra's mother screamed screamed as she heard the sentence, and Keandra looked shocked and confused. Can you imagine thinking you're getting no prison time only to find out you're getting 20 years? Luckily for Keandra, though, she later got a reduced sentence. Instead of 20 years behind bars, she got 11 years in prison and then 20 years probation. While it is surely a much less severe sentence, this teen will still have to pay for her crimes for many years to come.
According to the evidence presented at trial, Gamut used a frying pan, a floor lamp, and a large knife, which she used to stab Hill a dozen times. Gamut claimed self-defense, saying she believed Hill was an intruder.
Camilla Gamut never showed any remorse for taking the life of her boyfriend for seemingly no reason at all. And when given a chance to apologize ahead of sentencing, she decided not to.
I just want to say that I stick by the truth, which is that I did react in self-defense. I did love Marcel, and basically at trial, the way I was portrayed, mostly everything was lies. There was a little bit of truth, but mostly I was convicted off of lies, and I do plan to appeal it. And that's all I have to say.
The judge, who was already getting annoyed by her, tried to urge her to say something for herself. This was the last chance she was going to get, but instead she decided to still have an attitude.
Anything you want to tell the court about the 12 wounds that you did in self-defense?
The alleged 12 wounds?
Well, I don't think the pathologist lied about those.
No, I don't have anything further to say.
If the judge wasn't annoyed already, he became visibly angry after Camilla had the nerve to rudely interrupt one of her victim's family members while they were trying to give a victim impact statement.
You know what? She's got a right to talk to the court after you murdered a relative of hers. And you're going to shut your mouth or I'm going to have some duct tape put on it.
Well, he attacked me.
The judge finally had enough of this woman and sentenced her to life behind bars with no parole. But before he dismissed her, he had just one thing to say.
I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well.
The severity of the blow to that child's leg, and to say that you did not recognize what had been done, to ignore what must have been the excruciating sounds that came from that child on a daily basis, is more than disconcerting to this court.
The criminals in this case have to be some of the most sadistic, cruel, and heartless women to walk the planet. They are Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham. Both women are from Summerville, North Carolina, and were responsible for caring for a 3-year-old girl named Serenity Richardson. Erica was Serenity's godmother and her mother's best friend. Serenity's mom believed that her daughter would be safe in the hands of Erica and Shanita, but nothing could be further from the truth. After little Serenity accidentally had an accident in her pants, they attacked her mercilessly to the point that there were injuries on every single part of her body except for the soles of her feet. She died a horrible, painful death, but justice was served for the little girl, and both women were convicted for her murder.
And as such, the court finds it appropriate that each be sentenced to the State Department of Corrections for a period of life. You will get credit for any of the time that you've served.
Upon hearing their sentence, both of the defendants sunk to the ground and had to be picked back up by their lawyers. The screaming from inside the courtroom was so loud that it drowned out the rest of the judge's words. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.